webinar. Usually been able to get those out in the same day, but if not, tomorrow usually at the latest. So, and we'll also have the copy of the slides decks available to you after the webinar. So I'll email you directly with those links. Most of the questions can be afterward, or if you think of something that follows the webinar today, you can certainly email us directly at tanks.ust@tn.gov, or of course, if you can email any of our panelists or myself directly with follow-up questions or things that are on your mind. We're scheduled for an hour and a half today, just to be cognizant of everyone's schedule. But if you have time and we have discussion that rolls over, I think Dustin and Don Taylor and our other folks may have some time available if the discussion goes over. So if we need to, or there's a desire on your part to continue discussion, we're glad to stay. We are going to be repeating this entire series sometime later this year, but we have not set a date yet. But be watching out for our monthly newsletter, Tank Talk, for those announcements. So just want to emphasize that this is our implementation of Tennessee rules. So if you're joining us from another state, please, as you know already, please consult your state regulatory agency if there's something specific that you found out about in today's webinar that you may have questions or need follow-up. So please consult your state regulatory agency. On introductions, we have a number of panelists that we have recruited in our division that represent literally decades of experience in the underground storage tank programs, have probably 50 certifications between them all, and they are here because they are some of our most talented and knowledgeable folks. Not that we don't have a bunch of other folks that in our division that we have as much respect for, but they've been involved in both the revisions for our standardized inspection manual and our media coverage and outreach. Just a listing of our folks that are panelists today: Ben Rousey of our Jackson Environmental Field Office, Mitzi Berry in Johnson City, Nigel Luther in Chattanooga, David Stone in Knoxville. And our speakers today, primary speaker is Dustin Turner. You may remember him from the walkthrough requirements webinar that we had a few weeks ago. Dustin, prior to TDEC, he was a Tennessee Department of Agriculture Inspector, Weights and Measures Division. So he knows the underground storage tank systems from that perspective as well. He's been a case manager since 2014, a compliance inspector in 4 of our state regional offices, and he's also a graduate of our leadership program within TDEC. He's chair of, or he did serve as our chair of our division's Employee Engagement Committee. He's certified in tank and line tightness tested methods. He's an assistant project manager for our state infrastructure project, a joint venture with Tennessee State Parks to upgrade existing underground storage tank systems, while providing unique training opportunities for staff in the region. And he led the design for the division's mobile operations unit. Assisting him today is our central office environmental fellow, Don Taylor. Don's resume is extensive with 23 years of professional experience in environmental fields and petroleum underground storage tank background. He's not only started conducting underground storage tank compliance inspections a long time ago, 16 years ago. He holds he's the chair of the National Work Group for Leak Detection Evaluations from 2016. He's the 2015 Oswamo UST Tank Force. He served on that. And he's recently requested to become an editor of the Lost Line, a new EPIC publication. And he's also managing the division's infrastructure project. So with no more ado, I will turn it over to Dustin and Don. And appreciate so much, again, you being here. I'll return a little bit later as we have questions. Dustin, are you ready?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Good morning, everybody. So as Mark introduced, this is just a basic overview of the 2018 rule changes, which will go into effect October of this year. Here we have some resources for you to, if you have questions or want to see any of this stuff again, our webpage will have a link to just about all these videos and all the forums, anything like that. If you've ever been on there, it grows all the time, so that we're always adding stuff to it. Also, if you'd like to get signed up for the Tank Talk newsletter, all you have to do is send your name and email to Mitzi Berry at tn.gov to subscribe. They do a great job on those, very informative, and they're not too lengthy. Everything has a link on it, so it's very helpful when they send those out. Our compliance toolbox, which comes out in the trifolds every year with a USB adapter card in it that has all these same links in it as well. Got a quick reference guide to the rule changes, and also very important link down here is the draft forms that are changing. We've extended the public comment period on these forms to June. I believe it's June the 6th. But anyway, go check out the new forms for sump testing, for the annual walkthroughs, monthly walkthrough form. All that's in one form. We'd love to have some feedback on that from the tank owner perspective as well. Okay, so this is sort of an overview of what we're going to talk about today. Spill and overfill prevention testing, sump integrity testing for interstitial monitoring sites, release detection testing, monthly and annual walkthrough inspections, we'll touch on that. Compatibility, in reference to equipment compatibility with higher renewable fuel, ethanol, biodiesel, things like that content, which is coming, I'm sure. Also, release detection for emergency generators. And I do want to mention that these requirements are already applicable to any site that's been installed since October 13th of 2018. So any existing facility that was the UST system was installed prior to that date, these rules will take effect on October the 13th of 2021. Okay, so testing requirements. EPA says that these testing requirements must be conducted by a qualified person, and they sort of define that as 4 or 5 different things or different areas here. Licensed contractor certified by the licensed manufacturer obviously would be one. So if you have a Veeder-Root, anybody licensed to install that or service that would be able to do any of the the testing requirements for you on that. Also, we can approve people. And the Division UST, you can get approved if you don't have a specific certification. You can request approval that way as well. All the testing has to be conducted with division guidance. And if you can demonstrate adequate experience, that's a way that you can be approved by us. PEI also has some certifications. So as long as it's a nationally recognized organization such as PEI, which is a Petroleum Equipment Institute, that would also qualify you to conduct the testing needed. All the testing must be conducted and recorded in accordance with the device manufacturer's instructions. So, you know, each specific piece of equipment, each manufacturer is going to have their own specific testing protocol. Also, PEI has a nationally recognized practice. The RP, they're called RPs, is recognized practices, what they are, or recommended practices. And there's a bunch of different ones, you know, depending on what you're testing. There's a 1200, a 900. So the contractors will know what you're talking about if you ask to see any of that information. Also, we establish a format in the division for most of the testing that we ask to see, line tightness testing. We have our own forms for all that, corrosion protection, tank tightness testing. We now have forms for that, and some other things as well. So if we don't have a form established by the division, that's where you'd want to go to another resource such as PEI or the device manufacturer for that specific piece of equipment that you're having tested. Okay, so this is some spill and overfill devices. We just wanted to put some pictures up here to show you some of the equipment that you may have at your facilities. To the left, here's just a normal spill bucket. After it's been replaced, it looks like fresh concrete around it. They're also doing a hydrostatic test on this, it appears. Next to that's a ball float. You know, we're phasing those out. So if your facility has ball floats, we'll get into that here in just a few minutes. But there's some testing that you have to start doing of your ball floats to make sure that they're in place and functioning correctly. Next to that's going to be a overfill flapper valves, sort of what it's called most commonly across the spectrum. It's another overfill device. It shuts off the flow of your delivery once the tank reaches a certain point, depending on where it's set at. Should be at least 95%. And then over here at the far right, we have a overfill alarm, which has got an audible speaker in the box and a light that alerts the driver when they hit that threshold. Okay, so for spill prevention devices, your action is going to be to conduct a spill prevention integrity test every 3 years. Using the division form or a double wall spill bucket with interstitial monitoring may be used in lieu of doing a wet test. There's also some other test methods that are becoming prevalent with all of these new requirements. There's some dry methods where you don't have to use water to do your test. So there's all sorts of new technology coming out. Who knows what we'll have in a year or two from now. But there is other methods other than doing a wet test. So just consult with whoever your testing company is. Either one is acceptable as long as it is a third-party certified method. So your responsibility will be to maintain a pass and spill prevention integrity test within the last 3 years. or the documentation that the prevention equipment is double walled and monitored continuously. I'll get into that here just a little bit, the next slide, I believe, as far as how you can, what equipment that you have to have in lieu of doing the spill prevention device testing. Also, this integrity test must be conducted by October 13, 2021. Now, you're going to hear this date a lot through this presentation. We just want to emphasize that all these requirements are due by that date. Okay, so if you have the capabilities at your facility, you want to install a double wall spill bucket, and you want to install a sensor in the interstice, electronic sensor that's hooked to your leak detection equipment, your automatic tank gauge, or there is some standalone units that you can use. This will allow you not to have to wet test your spill buckets, but it has to be monitored just like you would if you had a double wall tank. You have to keep a monthly alarm history of this sensor, of each sensor in your spill bucket, and a sensor status report monthly. Now, even though this is not leak detection, that's the requirement that allows you not to have to do the wet test every 3 years. So it's probably a little bit more work to do it that way, but if you don't want to do the wet test, that's the way you can do it. If you have an IM site already, it really won't be that big of a change for you. Just, keep it like you would everything else. But it's not part of monthly release detection by rule. So if something happens, it is looked at differently, just like a spill bucket log. It's the same thing as looking at like a spill bucket log is currently. So if you have more questions on that, I know it may be a little bit confusing. Reach out to your local field office, me or Don. We'll be happy to explain, sort of walk you through that if that's something that you want to think about doing for your site. Okay, overfill prevention devices. These devices must be inspected every 3 years. And then as a tank owner, you have to retain those records. You have to maintain the records that demonstrate that your overfill functionality test was conducted within the last 3 years. This applies to all forms of overfill, and documentation must be maintained for 3 years on this. So overfill tests must be conducted by October 13th of 2021. You're going to have that date as memorized as we do by the end of this presentation. But this is, where they're going to remove your overfill prevention device, make sure that it functions once every 3 years going forward. Okay. So we've got 3 types of overfill prevention. Automatic shutoff, which is a lot of times called a flapper valve by your contractor and us as the regulatory entity. This is going to be set to fully engage at 95%. So when your tank's 95% full, this is going to shut off the flow to the delivery driver. Flow restriction, also called ball floats. That's the little cage at the bottom of the tube with the ball hanging in it that was in the earlier photo. These are set to engage fully at 90% tank volume. So they'll alert the driver by slowing down the delivery. It doesn't actually shut it completely off. However, these are being phased out. They cannot be replaced or repaired after October 13th of this year. So the only 2 options after that date for replacement are going to be to put in an automatic shut-off device or overfill alarm. Overfill alarms, sometimes they're called high-level alarms. They have to be set at 90% tank volume to alert the driver outside by that speaker and visual blinking red light that the tank's almost full. And they must be visible, so whenever you have your system installed, just make sure that you consult with your installer that they understand, and they all do, that the delivery driver has to be able to see the alarm. Okay, so getting a little bit more specific on shut-off devices, an automatic device or flapper valve stops the tank when and this is sort of a diagram of how it works. It's got a float in it. As that float, as the fuel gets to the float, there's a little flap shut-off valve in here that will close. These are located in the fuel pipe, where the driver does make the drop from. And this other photo here shows you what it looks like when it's activated. So the photo on the left, when the tank volume is low enough not to be activated, and then once the fuel level gets high enough to float the float and shut off the valve, that's the photo on the right. All right, so here's the ball float valves. This is actually one hanging in a tank. And as the fill occurs, once the liquid level reaches the ball is designed to float up and shut off the vapors from coming out of the tube. So once and that's supposed to be set at 90% capacity. So that'll be one of the things that your contractors are checking when they do whenever they remove this equipment to do the functionality test on it, is to make sure that it's set at 90% and to make sure that it functions properly. If they're found damaged or non-functional during that functionality test that you'll be having done, then you have to change method. This one's no longer allowed. You have to go to either an overfill alarm or the drop tube flapper valves. All right, so overfill alarm. It uses a sensor in the tank, which is the same sensor that control or lets you know your inventory and your water levels. It's the same probe that it uses to monitor the product in the tank. So an overfill alarm provides a warning when the tank is close to being 90% is what it has to be set at, and it has to be seen or heard by both the delivery driver, seen or heard. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. By the delivery driver. When the alarm activates, the delivery person to stop the flow of product to the tank immediately, obviously.
Dustin, if I could interrupt you for just a second. I do have a question from Tim Lassiter. The question is, if you have automatic shutoff valve, do you also have to have overflow, audible, alarm, and lights?
No, good question, Tim. Thanks. No, one or the other, or I mean, you can have multiple. Don't get me wrong. You could use a flapper valve and an alarm if you want to, but you only are required to have one of the three installed at your facility.
Great, I appreciate that. And okay, that's all we have for now. Thanks, Dustin. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so spill and overfill equipment repairs. So if you have a repair to your spill or overfill equipment, you have to test or inspect those components within 30 days after the repair or replacement of the spill or overfill prevention equipment. So, a lot of you are going to have some failed equipment this first go around, especially. Just ensure that your contractors don't get in a hurry and forget to do the function test once they repair and replace your equipment. They should be able to do it, as soon as they complete the repair, but sometimes they forget. But you got to have that done within 30 days of the repair being completed. You have to maintain this documentation of that test for your records also. And we'll get into the retention times a little bit later in the presentation. but just make sure that you do have a test once something's replaced and that you hang on to it. Okay, so for interstitial monitoring, systems that use IM, which is short for interstitial monitoring, for pipe and release detection must conduct a sump integrity test every 3 years. So if you've got a newer facility that has the sensors in the dispenser sumps and the tank top sumps, you have to test each one of those sensored sumps once every 3 years. And like I said earlier, there's a couple, there's a wet test method, and there's also some dry test methods out there that's becoming more popular. If you have a question about that, reach out to one of us, or your contractor should also be able to answer those questions for you. Okay, so tank owner responsibility would be to maintain a passing sump integrity test within the last 3 years. So that just means when we come after October 13th, we're going to ask to see your last passing sump integrity test. As long as it's data within the last 3 years going forward, you'll meet the requirements of this rule. Your sump integrity test records must be maintained for 3 years. So, if you had one 6 months ago, it's still going to be good for 3 years. You don't have to do it again before October 13th. We're just saying, and if you have a new installation. So if your system has been installed since October 13th of 2018, and you've had one done at install, it's also good for 3 years. So you don't have to do a new one just because that rule's taken effect, because these rules actually applied to you as soon as your facility was placed into service. I hope that's clear. All right, so tank and sump repairs. All the tank and piping sump repairs must be integrity tested within 30 days of the completion, just like for the spill and overfill. So your tests need to be conducted in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions, any division guidance that we have, a code of practice developed by a nationally recognized association, and the requirements determined by the division to be no less protective of human health and the environment. So that's the 4 criteria for the test. Maintain your test record for 3 years, and the repair records for the operational life of the UST system. So we're going to get into the retention time a little bit later, but any sump repairs, tank repairs, or piping repairs have to be kept for the life of the system. All right, so water disposal. This is the big question everybody's been asking for a few years now. UST division, Tennessee Division UST does not regulate the disposal of petroleum contaminated test water. So who does? Well, test water should be properly disposed of, and we've got some resources here for you to reach out to if you suspect that somebody's not doing this properly for you. So contact the Division of Solid Waste Management or the Division of Water Resources if you suspect that someone is not properly handling the test water from your facility. Okay, so release detection operability. So annual testing of electronic and mechanical release detection components are required. You have to maintain the 3 previous annual tests of release detection components. So I'm going to make sure I go over this pretty clear, because this is a big change. Previously we've only asked for the last test. Going forward, I want to make sure everybody understands that you have to keep the last 3 line leak detector tests. Also, the last 3 interstitial monitoring, tank, and sump sensor tests. So when they come out and they dunk your sensors in water to make sure that they alarm, the last 3 of those tests have to be kept going forward from 21 as well. So Also, the ATG gauge and other controllers, so when they test your alarm, verify system configuration, there's a little battery in your ATG, that's got to be tested now. Battery backup. Probes, they're looking for residual buildup, ensuring that the floats move freely, shaft's not damaged, cables are free of kinks, breaks, and that the alarm operates and communicates with the controller properly. So these tests have to be maintained for 3 years going forward. Vacuum pump and pressure gauges are uncommon method utilized in Tennessee. I'm not saying we want to put it in here because, you may decide to do the most state-of-the-art system that you can if you install a new tank system. But they're going to make sure that proper communication with the sensors and the controllers are in place. But most people, I've never seen a site in Tennessee yet with this setup. Not to say there's not one out there, though. Okay, so release detection components to be tested. This is an ATG hanging on the wall on the top left. We've got an interstitial monitoring sensor under it in a sump. Now this one, most of them don't look like that because that is a PVC cap that's got a hole drilled through it and a pipe with some holes drilled through it that's PVC to house the sensor. Most of these sensors are great, but some of them are metal little bell sensors, but that's not an actual sensor there. It's just a housing. There's a sensor inside of that. Okay, next to that's an ATG probe. You see your product float halfway up the shaft and the water float at the bottom of the probe shaft. So your overfill alarm is going to be controlled by the top float if you have an overfill alarm, and also your product inventory, things like that are controlled by that float. Okay, beside that is a mechanical leak detector for pressurized piping and an electronic leak detector on the far right photo. These are the components that have to be tested annually, and you have to maintain that record for 3 years. All right, East Tennessee Co-op, I believe. Okay, so monthly walkthrough inspection. All right, so your responsibility is going to be to maintain the records of a monthly walkthrough inspection that you conduct every 30 days, and it's going to consist of the following. You're going to inspect your spill prevention for liquid, debris, or damage. So just like you always did before with the monthly spill bucket logs, it's just put on it's just part of the monthly walkthrough inspection now. Okay, visually inspect the tank fill riser, drop tube, and flapper valve to make sure that it doesn't have any damage. Also, make sure there's nothing in that tube. It's not uncommon for a delivery driver to accidentally or intentionally, who knows, leave a fill or leave a gauging stick in that drop tube. We've seen it various times over the years. But anyway, if you find something in there, remove it. And also, you may want to have a conversation with your delivery company if that is something that you observe. Also, you're going to check for the operability of your release detection equipment. So just make sure that you're getting your monthly or your printouts. If you've got it programmed for weekly, daily, sometimes people do. Make sure that it's actually performing that function as you have it programmed. Also, look for alarms or any other unusual operating conditions during your monthly walkthrough inspection. And then, like I said earlier, just review your current release detection records and put them with your form. Your first monthly walkthrough must be conducted by October 13th, 2021, and you have to maintain a minimum of 12 months of those records. So 1 year worth of monthly walkthroughs, just like you had to maintain a year's worth of the monthly inspection, monthly spill bucket logs prior to this form. Okay, so every 30 days, inspect your spill buckets, just like before. Remove any liquid, check for cracks or damage. The things that we put in red are kind of some new things that are in these requirements, and you're going to see them on the forms when you switch to the monthly and annual walkthrough form. But you have to remove the fill pipe, remove any fill pipe obstructions. So, like I said, if you find a stick or something down in there, make sure you remove it. Also, inspect the fill cap. Make sure that it fits properly. That there's a rubber O-ring gasket on the bottom of it. Make sure that you have that, because that's a very easy way for water to get in your tank if that O-ring is not in place. Also, make sure that your cap's not hitting your spill bucket lid. But those can't come in contact with the cap. Okay, so also every 30 days, you're going to have to inspect your release detection records. You know, this is what we've got in here for SIR, which is statistical inventory reconciliation. You want to review your data and accuracy of daily fuel level readings. That's nothing new. You're going to check your tank monthly for water. That's always been a requirement, nothing new there. And then you're going to make sure that your SIR reports are received every 30 days from your vendor. So at the end of your reporting period, you want to make sure that you have your reports by then. Also, review your results, and you have to report any suspected releases. So any consecutive inconclusives or any fail has to be reported to the division within 72 hours. All right, so every 30 days, if you have an automatic tank gauge, you're going to make sure you don't have any alarms or unusual operating conditions. Review your monthly release detection records, so make sure you got a pass for each tank at least once a month. Nothing new there, really. But you do have to review that, and it is part of the form that you have to fill out. So you have to check that you did do that action. That's the reason it's in red on this. Also, you have to report all suspect releases, so there is a box for that on the monthly walkthrough. And then, so this is sort of just a reminder. If you're on continuous leak detection, CSLD or SCALD, if you have an INCON, and you're unable to get a passing test, you can run a static test on any ATG. So the only stipulation is you have to shut your store down for at least 3 or 4 hours to get a test run. But that is an option. And, you know, I don't know. We see it doing inspections. I don't know how many people really know that is an option. So we wanted to make sure that we mentioned that today. If you're getting, you know, the last 4 or 5 days of the month and you still don't have a pass on your ATG, you can run a static test on it. And you can get with your contractor. They can probably walk you through on the phone how to do that manually. But definitely reach out to somebody if you don't have that monthly pass, getting close to the end of the month. Okay, for interstitial monitoring, it's important, and this is not really new, but it is part of this new form, is to document and attach at least one monthly sensor status report, which is, there's a picture of it on the top right of this page. That's a sensor status report. And you also have to have an alarm history report each month. So attach both of those to this monthly walkthrough form, and you will meet your release detection requirement for interstitial monitoring. Also, ensure that all your sensors are normal, that you don't have any active alarms. If you do, you have to investigate those. You have to log that on the form as well. And, you know, if it's not able to be reconciled in 72 hours, then you have to report that as a suspected release to the division. Document your alarms and your response to them on the monthly inspection form. So if you have, you know, if you have a heavy rain event and, you know, you get a foot of water in one of your STP sumps and you have to get that pumped out, just make sure you document that that was the cause of the alarm and that you had it removed and the timelines on it. Make sure that you date all that right, because that's something your inspectors are going to look at when they come out. And, you know, I'd hate to see somebody have an actual problem and forget to date everything right. So just make sure that you take the time. I know it takes a little bit extra time to be that specific, but we just encourage you to write the dates on there, because, you know, all that's going to be, all the dates and everything are automatically logged in your ATG. So, you know, it's nice when everything correlates. Okay, so report all suspected releases. Just like always, you got 72 hours to notify us. Okay, so here's an example of this is the draft annual walkthrough inspection form page. This is like a 5 or 6 page document, so I really encourage everybody to go and look at it and give us some feedback on your thoughts of it. But what we've done is pretty much combined where we would have 4 or 5 forms previously where you have to keep up with. Everything's on one form now for your facility. So as long as you keep up with this packet, you should have everything that you need in one place. So the annual walkthrough requirements are that you need to conduct the annual walkthrough in accordance with one of the following. So your device manufacturer's instructions, obviously. There's also, PEI has a form. It's about 8 pages long. But in the interim, if you wish to use that form until our draft form's finalized, you're perfectly allowed to do that. And there's a link in the presentation I did on walkthrough inspections to that form. Lastly, our form is what we recommend, obviously. As soon as it's finalized, we highly recommend that you use our form to do your monthly and annual walkthroughs. Okay, so annual walkthrough inspections are conducted once a year, obviously, and they consist of the following. So you're going to visually check for damage, any leaks to the containment area, or releases to the environment. Also, you have to look at contained and non-contained dispenser sumps. So you want to look under your dispensers, whether they're contained or not. And you have to maintain that on a quarterly basis still also. So I don't want to confuse anybody in thinking that they don't have to look under their dispensers quarterly still. So that still is part of the monthly walkthrough. It's just still done quarterly though, but it is part of that form. Also, you have to look in your STP and transition sumps. So, you know, if you don't know what a transition sump is, I'll briefly mention that, even though it is pretty uncommon. So if you've ever had a piping upgrade or something like that, sometimes they'll take and connect an old piece of pipe to a new piece of pipe, and they'll have to cut out a box. It'll usually be a square box with a lid on it where they have joined those 2 pipes together. So make sure you're looking at pretty much just if you've got a cover over something, a manhole in your lot, look in there and make sure that everything looks normal. So if you have contained sumps, you need to remove that liquid or the debris. So even if you have a contained sump that does not require interstitial monitoring and you have an anode, let's say it's full of water. I'm just going to give you an example. So it's full of water. You've got an anode in there that you test every 3 years for corrosion of your flex connectors. You still need to remove that liquid annually to make sure that you don't have a leak somewhere. So when you get ready to do your annual walkthrough inspection, make sure that you have all the liquid removed out of the contained sumps that don't require interstitial monitoring. You know, don't just go out there and lift the lid, it's full of water. Well, it is, I mean, you really can't see anything when you do that. I know from experience doing inspections for years, you know, it's really hard to see anything in a sump that's full of water. So you have to remove that when you do your annual walkthrough inspection. Also, you know, it's a great idea to remove that prior to the division staff coming out to do their 3-year inspection with you. Just, you know, if you remove that, then they can see everything. They don't have to come back. That, you know, it might save you a notice of violation for having to prove that you don't have a leak in the sump. All right, so for double wall sumps that do use interstitial monitoring, you check for a leak in the interstitial area. So there's very few double wall sumps out there right now. I'm sure it's coming, but you have to be able to check for a leak in that interstitial area if you do install a double wall sump for interstitial monitoring. Okay, so check devices such as tank gauge sticks for operability and serviceability. You know, if you've got a stick like the bottom right photo, you definitely need to get a new stick. There's a little button on the bottom of that stick that needs to be in place that protects the bottom of your tank as well as the stick itself. It needs to be legible. You know, make sure you can read the 1/8-inch increments on that stick for your gauging stick, especially if you're using SERD. And then we got some examples here of the different equipment that you may have at your facility. So uncontained dispenser sump, uncontained STP sump, and then here's what I was talking about with a contained STP sump. So if this sump was full of water, you definitely want to have it emptied before you do your annual inspection. All right. Oh, also there's a contained dispenser sump, bottom left picture. Record keeping. We made it to here. So you got to maintain the monthly and annual walkthrough inspection records for 1 year. So this includes a list of each area checked, which all this is in the form. If each area was acceptable or needed action taken, and a description of the actions taken to correct the issue. Okay, so if you have a tank that you have a delivery less than every 30 days, you need to keep your delivery invoices handy for us to look at. I don't think those are going to be super rare. I've never seen one myself. Well, I'm sorry, one site. I've had one site like that. Okay, so just some general record keeping. Here we go. This is how long you need to keep everything. 12 months of leak detection results. Annual line leak detector test results. Release detection operability. Line tightness test for 12 months of your pipe and monthly monitoring results if you have electronic line leak detectors. 12 months of walk-through inspection. And the asterisk there, you're required to keep the last 3 years of those records beginning this year. So you have to keep the last 3 leak detector tests and the last 3 release detection operability tests, which is your sensor function test for your interstitial monitoring, things like that. Okay, so annual walkthrough inspection conducted in the last 12 months. This is just sort of a checklist for you. Spill bucket test conducted in the last 3 years. Make sure you got an overfill test conducted in the last 3 years. Make sure you got a sump integrity test conducted in the last 3 years, only if you have interstitial monitoring as your primary method of release detection. Corrosion protection test must be conducted in the last 3 years and the previous 3 years CP test. So you need two CP tests, the current one and the most recent one prior. So 2 corrosion protection tests. Your 60-day rectifier log, that is included in the monthly and annual walkthrough form. Any non-safe suction line tightness test, so, it's also called US suction. But anything that is not a safe suction line, you have to do a line test every 3 years, and that record's good for 3 years. So you have to do that once every 3 years, and it's good for 3 years. All right, so records for all leak detection system maintenance, service, or repairs, you have to keep it for 1 year from the date of that repair. Any documentation of tanker line repairs have to be kept for the remaining life of the UST system. So this is sumps, for interstitial monitoring, the sumps in that, and any tank or line repair has to be kept for the life of the system. Also, we see a lot of times where these stores change hands quite often. Make sure if you sell your facility that you transfer the records. It's actually in our rules, but just make sure that you hand over anything you have to the new owner. Makes it a lot easier on them, a lot easier on us. I mean, I know, but try to make sure to transfer your records to the new owner if you sell it. All right. Compatibility. E15 is probably coming. I don't know when. It's already in Virginia. I do know that. So I'm sure it won't be long before it's in Tennessee, and it may already be here. I don't know. But if your UST system is used to store more than 10% ethanol or more than 20% biodiesel, you're going to have to comply with the requirements for fuel compatibility. And you have to notify the division 30 days prior to storing that fuel. So as soon as you know you're going to make the switch, you need to do a notification form and also notify us. And then we'll tell you what you got to do. So just basically notify your local field office. You have to provide documentation showing that all of your UST system components, including your tank, piping, sumps, pumping equipment, release detection equipment, spill prevention equipment, overfill equipment, are compatible. And we have a compatibility checklist for you to do that. There's a link there at the bottom of the slide. And then you also have to have a statement of compatibility. So, I'm sure this is coming. I don't know if it'll be this year or not, but hopefully not with all the other changes that we have going on. But I'm sure in the future, some of you may want to add some higher ethanol blends. Okay, so there's probably not a lot of folks on here with an emergency generator system, so I will be brief on it. Basically, it's a huge change for generators, but anyway, they have to be, they're required to start using tank and piping release detection by the end of this year, or by October 13th of 2021. Obviously, safe suction piping does not require the release detection, but any of the tanks do. So what I want to emphasize here is if you have one of these systems and you have any kind of questions at all, please contact your local field office. They'll get you in touch with our staff that have the most experience in these changes, and they will get you in touch with somebody that will let you know exactly what you need to do. So that's our basic. That's the thing I want everybody to remember. If you have a system like this, is just reach out to your local office, and we'll work with you. If we need to come out ahead of time, see what you've got, and help you come up with a plan, we're happy to do that. All right, so here's some field options. each of the regional field offices' phone numbers. All their staff are on here. So this is a good resource for any of you to have. And feel free to call us with any questions. I mean, the more you know, the easier our jobs are. So, you know, ask a lot of questions. You know, we want you to know what you need to be doing, and we'll help you get there. All right, so that brings us to the end. Any questions on that? Mark, you got any new questions?
Did wanted to just go over a couple of them. The provided answers in the chat. One question by Ed Adams was whether the forms are new ones or whether they're new forms, and I answered and said basically many of them are revisions, but some of the new ones are the walkthrough form. So just to encourage everyone, while they're still under public comment, to take a look at those forms and give us feedback. And in the meantime, for the walkthrough form, you can use PEI or the manufacturer or anything that has the requirements in the walkthrough rule. So we want the public to have full access and comments back to us in developing these forms. So that's one of the reasons why we extended it. It's a voluminous amount of material for the standardized inspection revisions and associated forms. So we extended to that period a couple of months. So until that time, we make those final, at least for the walkthrough form, especially consult PEI or the manufacturer. And then there was another one related to that same question. So that's all I've got so far. I did supply the link to the rules page that has those draft forms and draft standardized inspection manuals. So hopefully that will provide a resource for folks as we go forward in finalizing those forms in the future. Are there any other questions of Dustin? And I know I'd mentioned that Don may speak today, but Dustin did so well covering the material. He didn't have to, so I didn't know if, not to put Don on the spot, but if you have any thing you'd like to add or change or any recommendations, glad to hear from you.
Thank you, Mark. Dustin did an amazing job as always, and just wanted to. The only thing I had to add at this point was that if there is if you have a specific facility that you would like to have the walkthrough process reviewed, if you have your own specific format that you'd like to have that reviewed in the interim before our form is developed, we'd be happy to take a look at that for you and approve any alternative versions of that walkthrough form if you would like to go through that procedure. That's all I had, but again, great job, Dustin, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Don. Any other questions before we go? And again, if you have other questions, you can certainly send them directly to our tanks.ust@tn.gov, or otherwise send them to me or other members of our team, either your local field office, as Dustin highlighted, or one of the panelists or presenters today. So I'll go over a few closing things. I want to again thanks to Dustin for presenting and preparing your presentation today. Nigel Luther, Mitzi Berry, and David Stone, who crafted the same presentation that's used in our tank school. We have a virtual tank school that Nigel Mitzi and David have been conducting since we've gone into COVID. We used to have those in person. So this a version of this presentation was updated, and that's where we started. So it saved us a lot to put those together. And I believe Don and Mitzi had put the same presentation or similar one early on in the program. Again, the future resources, please consult the new rules page that I provide the link on chat and the Q&A, so and also contained within Dustin's presentation. Again, today's webinar was recorded, and I'll be sharing that with you as soon as I execute a video link through YouTube. And then I'll also send you, if you've been in attendance today or registered today, we'll send you the copy of Dustin's presentation along with that video link that you can use at your leisure. Let's see, our next webinar is May 3rd, and it's the same subject as today. We're having 3 identical subject matter webinars as today. The rules overview for the rule changes to give as much access to these webinars as we can for our tank owners and operators, and of course vendors are welcome to attend too. So if you have not signed up for that, I'll include the link in that email that I told you about, and also you can register using our new rules webpage. Those links are there too. As Dustin mentioned, we're accepting public comments on the revised standardized inspection manual and forms. The actual date is June 11th. That's a Friday. So if you have any input that you'd like us to consider for those revisions, please submit them to us at tanks.ust@tn.gov. I have a special announcement today that I've not shared yet. It will be coming out in our Tanks Talk newsletter, the next one. The rule changes that were publicly held on December 1st of 2020 concerning the suspension of tank fees for tank owners for it'll go into effect July 1st of this year until July 1st of 2026. The graduated fund deductible levels for petroleum release expenses and the clarification of TOS rules will become effective June the 15th of 2021. So that's hot off the press. So it looks like we've had very positive feedback from our regulated community about those rule changes, and I just wanted to share that with you today. If you have any questions, again, visit our website and or email us directly. And concerning our webinars or anything we do for the program, speaking on behalf of the director, Stan Boyd, myself as deputy director, and our senior management team, we're on a constant circle of continuing improvement. So please contribute to the division's mission and desire to always have progressive compliance whenever we can. So we'd rather seek prevention as opposed to cures, and I hope you're and know that you're in the same team as that. So we're all in it together, like Dustin said. The more you know, the easier it makes our job. So that's part of what we're doing today. Let me check one more time just to see if there's any other questions that I missed. Let's see. Okay, I do have one from Daphne Berry. Can you cover the necessity for monthly spill bucket form and quarterly dispenser, hose, nozzle, UDC, etc. form, in addition to the monthly walkthrough form? Dustin or Don?
I'm not sure. Don, do you know what's that?
I assume Daffy's question relates to the continued use of those forms that we've developed in the past. The purpose of the walkthrough form, as we've written it, is to integrate all those actions together. Previously, you had a monthly spill bucket log, you had a quarterly dispenser inspection form, if you had any type of corrosion protection, then you had an impressed current rectifier log to complete. So you had several different forms. You had your interstitial monitoring log. You had a combination of different forms. What the walkthrough form is designed to put all that information into one source. I think you mentioned that briefly during your presentation, Dustin. But these monthly and annual walkthrough combined form that we have will serve as a substitute for those forms. I hope that answers Daphne's question.
Yeah, that's very good, Don. Yeah, that's very good, Don. If on our draft form at the top of it, it shows you the forms that the walkthrough form takes a place of, and there's 4 of them that you mentioned. So you can still use those old forms if you prefer, correct, Don? But if you use the walkthrough form, it'll take the place of those.
There are some supplemental requirements. Say, for example, in past, the quarterly dispenser inspections only ask you to inspect underneath the sump for the presence of a leak. When you're doing that now as part of your walkthrough process, you're not only inspecting for the presence of liquid, you're inspecting the integrity of that containment system for those sites that use interstitial monitoring. So in addition to spill bucket inspections, the scope of those has been expanded to include, visibly checking not just for the presence of liquid, but for damage to the spill bucket itself, for the presence of any obstructions in the fill riser. So there are some additional requirements. So if you chose to use those forms, then we would continue to use them. You need to add a supplemental walkthrough to that as well. Probably the PEI form would be the most suitable, but there is some repeat information that's included in that. So if there's been some feedback that we've received at this point from owners that want to develop their own procedure, again, I mentioned that earlier, we are open to that. If you have a proposed alternative version of the walkthrough form that you'd like to use.
Great, thanks, Don. I knew there would be some nuances. So I
we
do have another.
Need to approve that format in advance. So if you'd like to contact us and have a draft version of that form, we'd be happy to work with you on that.
Okay, great, thanks. I do have another question from Kelly Scott. Where are test records submitted for the state of Tennessee?
Okay, so I guess she's maybe asking if we have a database. There's not a database to submit those records online or anything. Those records just have to be maintained at the facility level at least. So when we come to our 3-year inspection, the owner-operators are able to provide that information at that time. Don, do you have anything to add to that? I think that was where she was going. Is there a database maybe for submittal of that? But you don't have to submit it. The only time we want to see those is if, we come out to do a routine compliance inspection, or if you have a release or suspect a release, we're going to want to see that information at that time.
That's correct, Dustin. And they would, an owner is allowed to keep those records at an alternate location, if it's your business office or an alternate location you're choosing, as long as they're available to our staff, to our field staff during the compliance inspection. They must be available that day.
Very good. Very good. And if I'm not mistaken, that is all the questions I see. I do see a question from Ed Adams as to when the new forms would be available. Well, the answer to that is because we've extended the public comment period, I don't see those being available before June. I was hoping something before then, but again, because we received requests to extend that period, we'll make them available as soon as all the public has had a chance for comment and get those to you. So in the meantime, if you can use those other resources, that would be the best thing to do for the time being. Any other, I believe that's all. So with that being said, Dustin and Don and our panelists, great job. Great questions by those of you who have participated. I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar now. We hope you can join us again in May. Be sure to register for those. Any of you that know anyone that had trouble logging on, hopefully they can catch one of the next two. So thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Monday. Goodbye.